Good morning, and Jessica beat me to it. Good morning, Jessica. How you doing this morning? This is Grant from State of the Spark, and we're so pumped for today's show. I'm so pumped for today's show. We're going to be covering what I consider the three major milestones. I hate saying three steps, but they're three major milestones, kind of waypoints on the way out of anger and despair. And part of that's understanding what despair and anger really is. But we're going to be covering that. We're going to be covering how aluminum foil is saving absolutely precious street art. And of course, we're going to be covering, what was my other? Oh, caffeinated restoration. Yes, we're discovering how caffeinated restoration, how forests are coming back with waste byproduct from coffee making. So we're going to be covering that, but of course, you know what we're going to do. We're going to be covering a morning cup of gratitude. Now, I was super blessed. Part of my gratitude, I was super blessed to actually, I ran into Brittany at a local coffee shop. And of course, we see each other throughout the year multiple times, but it's rare that I see her at this hour at this coffee shop. And she walked in and I was working and writing. And she hollered at me. She said, "Grant." And I was like, "What's going on?" And she walked up and she was carrying into the coffee shop her morning cup of gratitude. She was off to a meeting, about to put her cup of gratitude in front of everybody else. So I felt pumped about that. So grab your warm cup of tea, grab your warm cup of coffee, and join me. Post your gratitude in the comments. Let me know what you're grateful for today. Let me know what you're pumped to engage in this week. Let me know what you're putting your hands to that's keeping you excited. And you know, I'm gonna start. Here we go. I'm listening to like house music. I don't know if you guys can hear back the background noise, but I'm listening to house music, Avicii Radio. Loving it. So this morning, what I'm grateful for, two major things. Number one, I'm super grateful for Marissa's safe and joyful return. She and her friends got back, and they've been gone for the last week hiking and doing their thing. And it was so great to listen to some of the stories in the car. And it wasn't just camp stories. It was truly a powerful group of people having introspective moments. So I'm Mr. Questions. And I was just asking questions, and I was gaining so much by hearing some of the revelations. So I was grateful for Marissa's safe return, grateful that they had such introspective, powerful personal development stories from what Marissa guided them in. And lastly, I'm so grateful for morning rain. Rain to me is a sign of prosperity. As much as I love visiting the desert, and we even lived in the desert for 2 months at one point, we love the mountains. We love visiting the mountains, but whether it's the mountains or desert or ocean, doesn't matter. It's got to have rain regularly. And I love being in Florida. Rain is such a sign of prosperity and good things to come. Jessica, who even came back to Facebook against her better judgment. She jumped over here and says, "Today I'm grateful for community. With the help of a few people, she was able to finish a project that was taking her months to do on her own." And a point about this is actually a very important point that I want to call out because it's going on in me right now. And that is this. Too often, it's called Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time allotted. And the time we often allot ourselves are, I guess I'll just do it alone. I guess it'll just be me. And maybe we even wanted to do it alone. Marissa could not help but express how grateful she was to do the trail in this way, multiple nights with friends. And I've said this since the beginning of any of my shows. I hiked a mountain in South Africa alone. I took this mountain on Platyclip Gorge, Table Mountain. That's actually in the news right now. There's a fire nearby. But it was like a 4.5 hour trudge uphill, just straight uphill for 4 hours. And I did it. I was mega fit and I felt so good. And you could see the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, but I was alone. And I cannot stand that. Nothing is worth doing if it's not worth doing with people. So this is powerful, Jessica, that you were able to do this. And things get done faster and better and richer. So I also am feeling grateful for you, Jessica, that you had that experience. So that is stinking awesome. Let's talk about other news. news. Here we go. So in freaking other news, aluminum foil. Yes, aluminum foil can save precious street art. So we know the power of street art. I don't know if you've ever seen, and you should look this up if you've never seen it. The late Kobe Bryant obviously died tragically. There's a beautiful, beautiful piece of street art, a mural on the side of a 2 or 3 story building of him in his jersey, but also him in black and white with his daughter. And I do believe his daughter also passed. I'm not totally sure on that, but one of his loved ones died in the helicopter. I believe it was his daughter. It is a beautiful piece of street art. If you travel to any of your favorite cities, you have stumbled somewhere upon street art. Of course, we know a lot of the big stories, for example, Banksy. But what we often hear about is the follow-up of when this street art falls victim to other vandals. And the difference between a street artist and vandals probably is quality and fan affection. So sometimes the line is not too distinct. But we can tell, for example, when a Banksy gets vandalized by some lowbrow street graffiti person, I wouldn't even call them artists. Well, people have been trying to solve this. How do we preserve quality street art? And of course, when you talk about painting and preserving painting, you're going to talk about the Italians. You're going to talk about people from Florence. A team of Italian painters and researchers have partnered with the American Chemical Society to come up with a unique solution to removing unwanted vandalism from already existing quality street art. Now, this group from Florence has actually been working on this for about 30 years. They've included studies of spectrometry on all types of chemicals within paint, but specifically paint, which makes it stay, which is probably what makes it paint and not pigment, is the binders, the polymers, sometimes polymers, but the binders, the thing that makes it stick. And they've done a lot of research on polymers and how to remove unwanted art and basically loosen unwanted polymers. Well, they've come up with a unique solution with hydrogels. Now, if you haven't seen hydrogels in action in other industries, you should check it out. It's totally bizarro, totally cool. But what these researchers have found is that if you actually take the solvent, which removes the binders, and embed it in the hydrogel in a unique way, you can actually remove the overpaint, the unwanted vandalism from this paint. And it works kind of like Banksy's artwork. I don't know if you've ever seen Banksy's artwork, but he works largely from stencils. He massively plans out his piece. He cuts out the stencils he wants, and then he's able to execute his street art so quickly and so distinctly because he has these stencils. He pulls them out, he spray paints them, and he moves on. And so he can work very quickly. Well, the polymers kind of work the same way. If you actually have a piece of unwanted art, you can cut out this foil they use. It's not a spray gel. You actually put it on foil and you shape the foil to be the exact shape of the paint you want to remove. And on the underside is the hydrogel, which can stick on nearly any surface. Wait for a little bit, pull the foil off, and then you can literally wipe the loosened paint. Now, there is some risk here, and that is if you let it sit too long, it can actually cause, even if it's the exact shape of the unwanted paint, it can then cause the underlayers of the paint to also loosen. But if that's the case, they say you can just let it dry in the sun again and then reattempt the process. Very unique use of hydrogels and ancient Florentine artists and chemical science. A very cool use. And I'm going to put the link right there. If you're interested in seeing any of that and some of the murals I referred to, you're welcome to see it. In fact, the thumbnail right there, that is a photo of street art that's just gorgeous. You got to check it out. And so I thought that was a fun, unique use of hydrogels. Let's talk about caffeinated restoration. Here we go. So it looks like it has been discovered that coffee is not only good for our morning cup of gratitude, it's also good to help reforestation, especially in tropical environments. So for those who don't know, coffee agriculture can be done in a sustainable way, or it can be done in mass like it is for a lot of companies like Starbucks or Community Coffee. It's been discovered that coffee pulp, the actual pulp, oftentimes the little papery substance that comes off of it, but also the waste pulp, when you grind coffee up, coffee grounds, you end up with this waste product in coffee. And if you think about how much coffee the world consumes, this is supremely important. So first off, they clear cut land, right? They get rid of the forest canopy in tropical forests. And then they plant things like coffee. They plant a lot of other things, but they plant coffee as well. And then we drink it, consume it. And now they've got all this waste. And they've been burning the waste, burying the waste. They've even been trying to distribute the waste. You can go to your local Starbucks and ask for grounds for your garden. They'll pack up all the grounds and wrap it in for you. And then you can take it back to your raised bed or something like that. So they've tried. But this new group has actually run a really cool test in Costa Rica. So what they did was they took 2 plots of land, one a test and one a control. And in a 35 by 40 meter plot, they dropped about 30 dump truck loads, about half a meter thick, 30 dump truck loads on the entire area, and then just observed it. What they observed was nothing less than breathtaking. What they observed was this. On the test group, they found that in just about 2 years, nearly 80% of the entire plot had canopy, had forest tropical canopy. And in 2 years in the control group, pasturing grasses took over. And there was only canopy on 20% of the plot. Now, this is huge because when you think about canopy, it's like having a vertical garden. You can plant so many things on a horizontal garden, but when you go vertical garden, you're cubing. Your space that you're growing on is cubed. What that allows for is a lot of biodiversity, helpful pests, helpful bugs. You see more worms crawling in the soils. You see much more, and they also found much more carbon, phosphorus, and nitrogen in the soil. Now, is it because it's coffee pulp? Maybe. But they are discovering that much agricultural waste, especially food waste, like this coffee pulp, can actually probably just serve as what amounts to compost, a powerful, useful compost. So they do say there does need to be more testing, but it's a very hopeful way to say we can actually accelerate forest regrowth. Now, which I think the thing to hear about this is very important. Grass is very threatening to young trees, young plants that could have a higher story. And it's very important for biodiversity that you have a high story because there's multiple tiers of shade, fruit bearing, breeze, temperature adjustments, and those dynamics, the breeze, the wind, the temperature dynamics, it allows for water and condensation to gather. It allows for basically the restoration of the soil itself. Grass is harmful in that very young, grass stays low, but it can choke out other positive plants. So like I look at my yard all the time and I think, I just want to tear this entire yard up because it's such a threat if I just wanted to grow a permaculture garden, which is something I definitely want to do. But this is an interesting article. If you want to check this out, let me actually copy and paste it. And if Jessica's still watching, I know she does raised beds and is all about homesteading. So if you don't already, you're welcome to check out the quality of the grounds for your garden, for your compost from Starbucks. They definitely do that at your nearest Starbucks. So there's the link in the comments. So yes, you're having reforestation on crack, on speed. And Jessica says, yes, create a food forest. Jessica, you'd find it really interesting. If you haven't already, I'm sure you've researched food forests or permaculture. I actually want to create a permaculture garden. We've tried raised beds, and I just don't like how it feels nearly as much as I like the idea of a food forest. And there's a particular TikToker I follow who has a food forest, and it's very pervasive here in northern Tampa, and I want to visit sometime. So he has a consultation for $1,000 on how to turn your property into a viable food forest and assessing it. Interesting guy. So check that out. So that, my friends, is other news. Let's talk about dealing with anger and despair and the 3 major milestones of digging your way out of that as we go into a fresh new week. You don't want to carry that garbage into the new week. Let's talk about it. So, have you ever found yourself unable to move forward, feeling stuck, and the people around you, maybe people that you hoped were supporters, maybe business partners, maybe friends, they're just not behaving the way you want. And so you're feeling stuck, you can't move forward, and that just starts to boil into anger and despair and frustration, all the negative cortisol-driven attitudes. You know, I see this. This happens in me. It happens in a lot of people. And so this often actually culminates and climaxes in a form of repelling. Rejection and anger is huge. So this energy's got to go somewhere, right? And wherever it came from, it starts to brew in overflow. Now, I think the first thing we need to touch on is understanding where anger and despair come from and where they're going. So this mental loop, I believe, often starts with a false binary. There's a trigger. Someone behaves in a way that you don't like or might be threatening to your future or your goals. You have desires and something they're doing you think derails. Now, what you've immediately done, if you accept that paradigm in the moment, not right now, accept that principle right now, but in the moment, if you accept that paradigm, what you've done is accepted a false binary. Now, a false binary is this. Things are black or white. Things are yes or no. Things are my way or your way, or said another way, my way or the highway, said for the A-types. It's got to be this way and or that way, but it can't be both. And that is often the immediate response to a triggering event. Now, you might not be angry yet. You might just see it and you say, well, if they're doing this, then I can't do that. Or if they're doing this, then we have to do that. Now, the first problem is that you set up the binary. The trigger wasn't even the problem. We get triggered all the time. You get triggered when you cut off in driving. We get triggered all the time. But whether you're tired, whether your mental energy is low, whether you've had it up to here, whether this is the umpteenth time that you've tolerated this and there's been no deposits in your emotional bank account, whatever led you to snapping into the false binary. We often do false binaries because we've had this open-ended sore, this open-ended bruise, this open-ended pain, and we haven't been able to resolve it. And so if we can't resolve it being open-ended, being abundant-minded, being hopeful, if we're not getting the behavior out of the person, we eventually snap back. And it is kind of regressive. We snap back into a binary because we can handle binaries and we can make decisions, and the decisions are back to us. But a binary often comes from a low creative place. A binary often comes from a growing frustration. And if we go to the binary, because in the moment it feels more doable, it feels more manageable. If we do that, then suddenly we feel victim to the person. We've set up the binary. They may or may not. They might be an abundant-minded person. They might be a frustrating person, but you don't know. All you know is that you had a decision, and for some reason, your brain, consciously or unconsciously, snapped into a binary, and you said it's got to be this way or that way. And as soon as you said that, and the person did not choose the one way that you would have preferred, you suddenly feel victim. Now, victimhood is interesting. Barring a crime against your person, rape, robbery, intentional maliciousness. Jessica says, thank you so much for explaining the binary. This makes so much sense. You're welcome. I think a lot about binaries because I often unintentionally have them. And it's much easier, and it often comes from frustration. You know, there was one of my highest moments of public education, not public, standard education. So I did finish my AA, and I hope to one day finish my BA, and I would love to finish my advanced degrees. I would love that. In my AA, I studied philosophy, and one of the philosophies that stuck with me was called third option ethics. And it just articulated that there's always a third option. If you have the mental and emotional reserve to do that, if the emotional bank account with the person you're interfacing with has been filled enough. You ever get bumped in line by someone you have no relationship with and immediately you judge them? Whether or not you say anything, I often say something, but whether or not you say anything, you might be kind, but you judge them. You have no relationship there's no deposits in the relationship bank account. They are a binary. They're rude or kind. What about the middle day? What about the middle? What if they're having an off and on day? What if they're on the edge? Nope. To you, they're rude or kind. It's easier to deal with their infraction on you that way. Third option ethics. Look it up. So what happens next in this binary, as I said, is that you set up the binary, and probabilities wise, this person will not choose your preferred option. Probabilities wise, they will choose something. Given a spectrum, they'll choose one of 1,000 things, but given a my way or the highway, given a binary, no one likes to be forced to choose me or this. Choose me or this. Choose my day and make sure my day is good, or you have a good day, but you got to pick one. Well, can't we both have a good day? And for those who are already mentally struggling through a week or through a day or through a season or through a life is already hard enough. And for you to force a binary on them often makes them put up walls. Now, they might actually prefer your option, but what they're saying no to is not the options you've given them, but they're saying no to you forcing them to make that distinction. So there's a triggering event, you have a binary, you suddenly feel victim because they're not choosing what you want them to choose. And this then begins to build the anger. See, no one also likes feeling like a victim. And if you weren't tracking, you made yourself feel like a victim. You forced another person to make a binary decision of their own. So now you have your normal grab bag of options on how you're going to react to being a victim. You see, everybody needs an enemy. I was listening to the 48 Laws of Power this weekend, and I don't agree with everything this author says. This is the second time through it, and the first time I chafed at this person's paradigm. But if you're seeking power, it works, and it's accurate because it takes into account the triggers of human nature. Everyone needs an enemy. 48 Laws of Power calls this out. Everyone needs an enemy. And this is why hero stories are so pervasive. This is why politicians quite often set up an unreachable enemy. This is why when we went from having wars on countries, especially during the age of social media, when we could eventually build rapport with these people and choose not to kill them, why we switched from war on enemies to the war on terrorism. A faceless, nameless Goomba in the dark trying to get you. And it bound us all together. We all need enemies because we need something to direct our ire at, our anger at. But when it's those closest to us and when we've set up a binary, and then they're not saying no to the choices you've given them, they are saying no to being forced to make a choice, you then feel rejected in your own binary, your own construct. And so you begin to feel like a victim, and no one likes feeling like a victim. And suddenly your binary is not a binary between two options, left or right. Your binary actually is positioned me or you. And that binary is never two items set perpendicular to you and the person you're talking to. The binary is eventually truly emotionally, not logically, not rationally, but emotionally actually my heart or your heart. You're giving them the option to be your enemy. And if they choose, but you've named these boxes something else. You've named them left or right. You've named them Republican or Democrat. You've named them mainstream, or I know, Jessica, you're not like this, but when we were looking at living off grid, there's off gridders and there's on gridders, right? And even though you've labeled these buckets something else, what you're really saying is my heart or your heart. And if you frame it that way, you don't want to frame it that way. You resist it. But it's so much easier to be in victimhood. It is. We are programmed. This is why one of the ancient mystics, King David, said, I was born in sin, right? I was born to do this. I'm so easily triggered this way. So once you start feeling like a victim, once they have chosen, well, if you're telling me it's my heart or your heart, Grant, I'm going to choose my heart. I don't feel like it's my heart or your heart, but you're making the rules now, and I want to respect your rules. So if you're making me choose one, I'm going to choose my heart. And when they make that choice, even though you've named these buckets something else, you feel that decision. And in feeling that decision, you're going to then react with your prescribed reaction based on your temperament and history. That could be cold shoulder, it could be withdrawal, it could be rejection, it could be absolute anger. But now, the final step is true no matter what your temperament. Now you can blame. This is where blame comes from. And once we blame, we look for people to affirm our decision, affirm this very complicated journey of emotion. And then we actually create rules that begin with never again will I. Now, I have a lot of rules in my life. And those rules very rarely begin with never again will I. Usually it's I am this, I will be that. This is how I like things. And I try to reframe them, but it's only a smidge better than never again will I, because I don't like the negative phrasing, because negative phrasing is the I'm this. I'm not a off-gridder. I'm an on-gridder. And the distinction, though, is a smidge. The distinction is important. It's our attitude to the world. So I'm not talking about making rules, limiting beliefs that will help you. I'm talking about making wounded rules that every time you say them reinforces this negative story. Cold shoulder, blame, rejection, distance, all of it accumulates with uneasiness, or we call it dis-ease, right? And it always culminates in blame. It fulfills the cycle and closes the loop. We have an open loop, my heart or your heart, left or right. This false binary, pick one, and one of them's anchored on my heart and one of them's anchored on your heart, and I can't solve this because you don't want to make that distinction at your core either. But people have to take you at face value. And if they respect you and love you, even though they see that it's self-destructive, they want to respect whatever line you feel like you've crossed. They don't want to be forced to make a decision, but ultimately they will make the decision. If you're saying my heart, your heart, I'll choose mine, but I don't want to. But you have a small amount of relief because this false paradigm, which caused you so much anxiety that you created, the loop is now closed. And now you can move from victimhood, anger, to blame and anger. This sucks. This cycle sucks. And I'm sure that you can look through your life, the people you are absolutely in love with right now, I'm sure you can look at your life and think, that would never happen with this relationship. And then the people that you're just on the outs with, people you just cannot stand, people that you've tried again, I guarantee you've gone through some form of this cycle with them. Guarantee it. But there's another way. There's a better way. And it takes more mental energy. But here it is, the 3 milestones. Number 1. And I'm going to give you the line from my personal study this morning that I read, that in an instant I read this and I saw this entire cycle and the alternative. Oftentimes, the trigger is only a trigger. Hear me on this. A trigger is only a trigger. if you're tapped, someone could bump into you and you could absolutely be mentally exhausted. Exhausted with life, exhausted with the way things are. You wake up, it's Monday, and you're looking at your week thinking, oh, another week. I hope it wasn't like last week. I hope it's better. And you're exhausted and you don't want to look at the world, and then someone cuts you off in traffic and someone bumps into you, or someone takes your ball and goes home. These things wouldn't trigger you if you felt abundance. These things wouldn't trigger you if you knew you were on your way. So I might talk about being tapped and exhausted, but truth is tapped and exhausted is not the opposite of energized. Tapped and exhausted and not full of your own oomph comes from lack of the following. And these are the three major milestones. Number one, you need to have an absolutely clear goal. You might be tired, but if you are still filled in your mind with your own goals and your own direction, someone could bump into you or cut you off and you're like, oh, I got other things to do. I got other things to think about. I got other things that inspire me, and it's not that. Have a good day. Good luck. You'll breeze right on by it because the goal inside of you is bigger. That's number one. Have an absolutely clear goal. Number two, and this is important, cultivate absolute shit-enduring resolution for that clear goal. The quote was from the Hagakure, my samurai book. It's over there, but I've gotten written right here. The Hagakure, my samurai book. I opened it up this morning, and the very first line I read was this. You ready for this? This is a quote from the 1600s samurai. And it was the number one province in Japan at the time for samurai. It was this. You will be tripped up by people when your resolution is lax. Let me say that again. You will be tripped up by people when your resolve, your resolution is lax. So if number one is have an absolutely clear goal, for yourself, no one else even has to know it. I mean, for other reasons, I believe other people should know your goal. But in this, to avoid false binaries and to avoid anger and cold shoulders and rejection, I want you to have an absolutely clear goal of your own. In your heart, who am I going to be? And then answer that question. We've talked about dream machines. I've got 240 things. I mean, all of those things. The who, an absolute clear goal of who you are going to be, including some set milestones in front of you. And then number two, cultivate absolute, solid, albeit quiet, resolve about that thing. The quote is, you will be tripped up by people when your resolution is lax. If you're standing in the line at the post office or wherever, and you've got an absolute clear goal, that clear goal should increase your serotonin and your oxytocin quite a bit relative to the binary we painted the picture of. The cortisol is up. You're absolutely myopically focused on this other person. When you're focused on your goal, you're elevated. And when you think about it and daydream about it, and you should daydream about your goal while standing in line at the post office. It's a waste if you're not daydreaming about your goal. Especially it's a double waste if you're worrying about things. And then what's more, while you're daydreaming in order to cultivate shoulders thrown back, head held high resolution. I'm going to do this thing. Now, chances are, if you're already there, you're already aware of your world while being in your head. It's a heightened level because your reticular activating cortex then goes to work trying to draw the elements of the universe, the elements of your world, the elements of relationships, the elements of resources. It's looking for these, whether you're conscious or unconscious of it. I'm often conscious of it. But either way, you stand up straight, eyes forward, because you never know when the answer to your goal will pass you by and you can engage them and make eye contact and pull them into your dream. That's why we have stand up held high. We're both in our spirit, in our mind, and in the world. We're trying to make a laser-like eye contact connection with the answer to your dreams. Step 2, cultivate absolute, shoulders thrown back, head held high, resolution. And number 3, you've heard me say this 1,000 times, but in this context, it has fresh meaning. So don't glaze over this. The third milestone is mindfulness. The samurai said, so that you're not tripped up in conversation dialogue. This line, you will be tripped up by people when your resolution is lax. It then goes on to say, what if you entered a meeting with important people and your resolution was lax? And you might even be daydreaming about other things or even fantasizing why you just don't like this person and they're talking, but you want to seem polite. So you say, of course. And they're thinking you're agreeing with them, or you're going along with whatever they're saying, as opposed to that is a lack of mindfulness. But if you have absolute resolution and are present, you're fantasizing and you're in your head about your dream and someone walks by and you're mindful that this seems like a pleasant person, let me engage them, or this seems like a person in need, let me help them. The samurai says you don't want to be tripped up in conversation or dialogue. Zen Buddhism, from Living Buddha, Living Christ, he goes on to say this. It's very important. This is from Thich Nhat Hanh, otherwise known as Tay. He says, mindfulness makes room for you to be connected to your deepest self. Presentness, mindfulness makes room to be connected for your deepest self. He says, which you are then able to move into tolerance, deep openness, deep understanding, with resolve to move toward your own life. Mindfulness allows you to be aware that, wow, normally this car wreck, normally this person bumping into me, normally this person's actions would really put me off. But I've got a very clear goal. I'm absolutely resolved for it. And though I want this person to do it with me, though I want that person to get out of my way, though I want this person to bring their resources, though I want that person to remove their hate, I'm absolutely resolved regardless. And I'm mindful of these things. That mindfulness then removes the binary and puts it on a genuine spectrum. Mindfulness, the clear goal says, if you have a clear goal but don't have mindfulness, you could be forcing another binary on people. This is what I'm doing, and you're either my way or the highway. If you have absolute resolution, it could make it worse. It's the mindfulness that creates a spectrum for other people to be involved. Set an absolutely clear goal. Cultivate absolute resolution. And then, to the best of your ability, be mindful. Listen, that's what I got for you today. I'm heading to coffee. I hope you have a phenomenal week. I hope you get out there and make an impact in people's lives. If you need any resources, visit us at stateofthespark.com. If you want to just continue the conversation, you know what to do. Visit us at the Facebook Goals and Gratitude group. But no matter what you do today, remember to ignite lives of explosive significance, starting with your own. Have a great day.